The night I realized my husband's best friend had become the person I trusted most, I was standing in my kitchen with tears running down my face. My husband was asleep upstairs. His phone was on the table. And on that phone was a message that would destroy the life I thought I knew. But the strange thing was, the betrayal didn't begin with that message. It began months earlier, with a small favor from the one man I never expected to become part of my story. His name was Daniel, and he was my husband's closest friend. To understand how everything fell apart, I have to take you back to the beginning. My husband, Michael, and I had been married for 11 years. From the outside, our marriage looked perfect. We had a comfortable home, a stable life, and 2 beautiful children. Michael worked long hours as a sales manager, while I worked from home. We weren't rich, but we had built a life we were proud of. At least, that's what I believed. Daniel had been part of Michael's life long before I met him. They had grown up together, played football together, started their first jobs together. Whenever Daniel came over, Michael would joke that he was practically family. I never thought much about it. Daniel was polite with me, respectful. He never crossed a line. If anything, he seemed like the kind of man you could trust. Then one rainy afternoon, something happened that seemed completely harmless. I was carrying several heavy boxes from the garage when one of them slipped from my hands. I tried to catch it. I couldn't. Before it hit the floor, Daniel grabbed it. "Careful," he said. I laughed nervously. Apparently I'm stronger in my imagination. He smiled. "Let me help." That was all. Just a simple favor. But that afternoon became the beginning of a friendship I never expected. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started helping whenever Michael was busy. A broken cabinet, a leaking tap, a problem with the car. Nothing romantic, nothing suspicious. At least, not at first. Michael was grateful. Honestly, he once joked, "I don't know what I'd do without that guy." I smiled. Neither did I. Then Michael started changing. He came home later. He stopped asking about my day. He became protective of his phone. And whenever I entered the room while he was texting, the screen suddenly disappeared. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Marriage goes through phases. People get tired. Work becomes stressful. I didn't want to become the suspicious wife who questioned everything. So I stayed quiet until one evening, Michael forgot his phone on the kitchen counter. A message appeared. I wasn't trying to read it, but I saw the first few words. "She still doesn't know." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "We need to be more careful." I couldn't breathe. I picked up the phone. But before I could unlock it, Michael walked into the room. He froze. So did I. "What are you doing with my phone?" His voice wasn't angry. It was frightened. And somehow, that frightened me more. I wasn't reading it. I whispered. He grabbed the phone. "There's nothing going on." I looked into his eyes. "Then why are you scared?" He didn't answer. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse him. I was going to find the truth. And the truth came faster than I expected. A few days later, Michael told me he was going out with Daniel. Just the 2 of them. At least, that's what he said. But something didn't feel right. So when he left, I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. At nearly midnight, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I stared at his name for several seconds before answering. "Hello?" There was silence. Then Daniel spoke. "Are you alone?" My stomach tightened. "Why?" He took a breath. "Because there's something you need to know." My hands began shaking. "What?" Another silence. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Michael hasn't been honest with you." I sat down. "What do you mean?" Daniel told me that Michael had been seeing another woman. For months. I felt as though the room had disappeared around me. "How do you know?" "Because I found out by accident," he said. Then he told me something even worse. Michael had asked Daniel to cover for him. Daniel had been lying to me because he was afraid of destroying their friendship. But eventually, his guilt became stronger than his loyalty. "I should have told you sooner," he said. I couldn't speak. For months, I had blamed myself. I had wondered why my husband seemed distant. I had wondered whether I wasn't attractive enough, interesting enough. Young enough. Now I knew. The problem wasn't that I wasn't enough. The problem was that Michael had stopped respecting the promises he made to me. When Michael came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table. His face changed when he saw me. He knew. "You talked to Daniel," he said. I nodded. "How long?" He looked down. "Almost a year." A year. 12 months of lies. 12 months of pretending. 12 months of looking me in the eyes and telling me everything was fine. I asked him one question. "Do you love her?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. I stood up. "Then why did you stay with me?" His eyes filled with tears. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Losing my family. I shook my head. "You already did." He cried. I didn't. I had cried enough. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. Not because I knew exactly what I wanted, but because I finally understood what I couldn't accept anymore. I left the house. I left Michael. And I left behind a woman who had spent months pretending everything was okay. For the first time in years, I had to learn how to stand on my own. Daniel stayed away. He didn't call constantly. He didn't try to become my replacement for Michael. And strangely, that made me trust him even more. One evening, months later, he came to check on me. He stood at the door and said, "I don't expect anything from you." I looked at him. "Then why are you here?" "Because you shouldn't have to go through this alone." Those words stayed with me. Not because they were romantic, because they were kind. For months, Daniel had carried guilt for keeping Michael's secret. And I realized something. The man who had helped me through the worst chapter of my life wasn't the man I had expected. But I also knew I wasn't ready for another relationship. I needed to heal. So I told him, "I care about you, but I need time." Daniel nodded. "Take all the time you need." And he meant it. There were no promises, no pressure, no secret relationship. Just two people trying to rebuild something that betrayal had nearly destroyed. Eventually, I filed for divorce. Michael tried to change. He apologized. He promised therapy. He promised honesty. And maybe he really did change. But forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing someone from your life without carrying hatred for them. A year later, I was standing in the same kitchen where I had once discovered my husband's betrayal. But everything was different. The house was quieter. My heart was lighter. And Daniel was standing beside me, helping me fix a cabinet. I smiled. "You know, this is how all of this started." He laughed. "Me helping with a broken cabinet?" "Yes." He shook his head. I had no idea that little favor would change both our lives. Neither did I. But life has a strange way of bringing people into our stories. Sometimes they arrive to teach us something. Sometimes they arrive to hurt us. And sometimes they arrive to remind us that kindness still exists after betrayal. I never planned to fall in love with my husband's friend. I never imagined my marriage would end. And I certainly never imagined that the man I once saw as simply Michael's best friend would become someone I trusted with my heart. But one thing I learned through everything was this. Being betrayed doesn't mean you're broken. It means someone broke the promise they made to you. And you are still allowed to rebuild. You are still allowed to laugh. You are still allowed to trust again. And most importantly, you are still allowed to love. Because sometimes the end of the life you planned is the beginning of the life you were meant to live. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need to hear that healing is possible. And if you enjoy emotional stories about love, betrayal, and second chances, subscribe for more. Because sometimes the person who helps you survive your darkest chapter becomes a reason you finally believe in brighter days again.